On tonight's summary of the Israel-Hamas War, day 157. Israel carried out a bombing in the Nuseirat refugee camp in the central parts of the Gaza Strip, targeting Marwan Issa, the deputy leader of the al-Qassam Brigades and number 3 in Hamas's Gaza leadership. The U.S. intelligence agencies published their annual threat assessment, estimating that contrary to Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu's statements, Israel will be dealing with armed movements in the Gaza Strip for the coming years. A Palestinian was killed in the West Bank village of Zayta on his way to carry out a suicide attack in Israel. The IDF carried out attacks in the Baalbek regions, one of the farthest areas the IDF has attacked in Lebanon. The UN Security Council holds a special session on the UN report regarding sexual violence that occurred in the October 7th attack. Israel calls for Hamas to be sanctioned by the United Nations. Hello everyone. I am Alon Burstein, visiting assistant professor in the Department of Political Science and Israel Institute fellow at the University of California, Irvine. Here I bring you the summary of the last 24 hours of the Israel-Hamas War. It is currently the evening of March 11th, 2024 in the United States, the morning of March 12th, 2024 in the Middle East. Starting with the hostage situation, trying to break the stalemate in negotiations, there is reportedly growing disagreement in Israel's war cabinet. According to reports that came out today, Minister Eisenkot is advocating that Israel's negotiating team should be given more leeway during negotiations in hopes of achieving a breakthrough, while the rest of the cabinet members insist that Israel maintains its position until Hamas gives its concrete offer in writing and Israel can respond to it. It was reported that members of the war cabinet are receiving information that the international pressure on Hamas, which includes Qatar threatening to expel the movement's leadership and freeze its assets, is beginning to have some effect, and some movement is being seen on Hamas's side. In addition to this, Al-Arabi al-Jadid quoted Egyptian sources today, reporting that during his visit in Cairo this weekend, the CIA director, William Barnes, tried to push for a short 2 to 4 day truce between the sides, during which time Hamas will supply a list of hostages it is holding, and not the hostages held by other organizations, to Israel. So this is reportedly another one of these attempts to break through the current deadlock. Israel has demanded a list of all the hostages, and knowing who is alive and who is dead. Hamas has said that they're not going to give this list, however now the CIA director is trying to seemingly give a way to both sides to climb down from their positions. In addition, Al-Arabi al-Jadid quoted Hamas sources stating that contrary to what has been published, Hamas does not object to supplying a list of which hostages are alive, but that it will take several days to create such lists, and that the group cannot confirm everything about hostages who were guarded by units with whom the group has lost contact. So right now, negotiations are still stalled. Seemingly there's an attempt to restart them now that Ramadan has officially started. Previously, the deadline to achieve a deal was by Ramadan. Clearly, that has not happened. And now the sides are trying to say, okay, how can we try to restart negotiations during Ramadan, maybe come to a deal in the coming weeks, still during the month. Moving on to the Gaza Strip, there were no rockets or mortars sent from the Gaza Strip targeting Israel in the last 24 hours. Regarding the fighting in the Gaza Strip, in the central parts of the Gaza Strip, after I reported 2 days ago that there was a bombing in Nuseirat refugee camp and several people were reported killed, today the IDF and other news agencies published information about that attack. According to the reports, the IDF carried out a major airstrike targeting a tunnel where IDF intelligence indicated 2 senior Hamas figures were located. The first and more prominent one is Marwan Issa. He's the deputy of Muhammad Def, the leader of the al-Qassam Brigades, who replaced Ahmed Jabari after he was assassinated by Israel in 2012. He's the third most senior figure in Hamas leadership in the Gaza Strip after Yahya Sinwar and Muhammad Def, and has over the past 25 years also survived 3 assassination attempts by Israel in 2006, 2014, and 2021. Issa is also one of the main architects of the October 7th attack and was reportedly in this tunnel in the Nuseirat refugee camp. With him in the tunnel was reportedly Razi Abu Tamaha. Tamaha is formerly the Hamas commander of the central camps in the Gaza Strip. However, today he is actually the figure in charge of all weapons of the Hamas movement within the entire Gaza Strip from north to south. Their death has not yet been confirmed, although several different senior Israeli officials implied that at least Marwan Issa was killed. If this is the case, this is the highest profile assassination in the Gaza Strip that the IDF has carried out since the war began, and it is somewhat in parallel to the high profile assassination of Salah al-Aruri, that is one of the deputy leaders of Hamas in Lebanon. This would be one of the most biggest achievements of the IDF in terms of targeting the Hamas leadership in the Gaza Strip, and would also logistically and militarily be a major blow to the Hamas movement, again at least in the Gaza Strip. The IDF spokesperson Daniel Hagari emphasized when reporting on this attack that all intelligence information the IDF has indicates that there were no hostages in the vicinity of this attack. In the southern parts of the Gaza Strip, the bulk of the ground fighting remains in Han Yunis. There's continued operations reported in the Hamid City region, with IDF ground forces continuing to sweep through the different buildings within the neighborhood. Many gun battles were reported throughout the different areas. As part of the activity, substantial tunnel array was discovered in the last 24 hours, including areas for manufacturing weapons and food storages. A concrete factory that had been converted to be used for creating equipment for building tunnels was also found. Reportedly, according to the IDF, the factory and the tunnel were both destroyed. Other news related to the Gaza Strip. CNN quoted senior Israeli political and security officials today, stating that the operation in Rafah, that is the IDF's invasion of Rafah, is not imminent, and that the IDF has yet to complete all operational plans for evacuating civilians from the region, plans which themselves are due to take over 2 weeks. So if we take that report and say that the IDF plans have not yet been finalized, and that the plans themselves would take at least 2 weeks, it is unlikely that the invasion of Rafah is going to occur during the month of Ramadan. In the United States, there were other reports that also suggested that despite the threats of Minister Gantz during his tour of the United States, stating that the operation is imminent, it is unlikely to occur during the month of Ramadan. This comes amidst a lot of U.S. pressure to also not carry out the operation during this month and not carry out any operations before civilians are evacuated. There is always a possibility that this is IDF subterfuge, trying to make Hamas believe that the invasion is not coming, when in fact it is. However, with the political and diplomatic pressure, it does seem less likely that the IDF invasion of Rafah is imminent. Other news, the IDF issued a reprimand against one of its senior officers, Barak Hiram, for ordering the detonation of the Al-Asra University in Gaza City over 2 months ago. Hiram ordered the detonation without senior approval, which was required for such an operation. The act resulted in substantial international condemnation at the time when the detonation occurred. In addition, today there was also substantial condemnation of the IDF from within Israel's right-wing elements of issuing that reprimand, stating that Barak Hiram is in fact a hero, that the university should have been detonated, and that this reprimand is going to limit IDF officers in their operations. Other news, U.S. intelligence agencies published their annual threat assessment report. According to this report, there is estimates in the U.S. intelligence community that the IDF is going to be dealing with armed resistance in Gaza for years to come. The report adds that the IDF will have difficulty neutralizing all of Hamas's underground infrastructure, and also states, with regard to the political establishment in Israel, that Prime Minister Netanyahu's ability to control his extreme right-wing coalition is in doubt, and that there is possibility that the government will be replaced in Israel. However, it is more likely that there will be political instability as a result of mass protests that will lead eventually to the government falling. Regarding casualties, no IDF soldiers reported killed in the Gaza Strip in the last 24 hours, leaving the total number of IDF soldiers killed in the Gaza Strip since the invasion began on 249. One IDF soldier was reported badly injured in the Gaza Strip in the last 24 hours. However, as I've said in the last several days, the numbers of IDF soldiers injured in the Gaza Strip since the invasion began is somewhat confusing. The numbers appear to be changing constantly. This could be a result of misreporting or a result of numbers being eventually fact-checked and then changed. Right now, the total number of IDF soldiers that are reported officially by the IDF as injured in the Gaza Strip since the invasion began is 1,473. This is actually one less than was reported yesterday. Regarding the Palestinian side, the Palestinian Health Ministry in the Gaza Strip is reporting that 67 Palestinians were killed in the Gaza Strip in the last 24 hours, bringing the total number of Palestinians killed in the Gaza Strip since the war began to 31,112. 72,760 Palestinians were reported injured in the Gaza Strip since the war began. Moving on to the humanitarian situation in the Gaza Strip, the U.S. military reported carrying out another mission of paradropping aid into the northern parts of the Gaza Strip, stating that this paradropping included 27,600 meals and 25,900 bottles of water. Jordan also continued its paradropping missions today, although it was not reported this was in the northern parts of the Gaza Strip or the rest of the Gaza Strip. And for the first time, it was also reported that a Moroccan plane took part in paradropping aid in the Gaza Strip. Other news related to the humanitarian situation. Israel approved a request from Germany to transfer 60 Gazan orphans aged 3 to 15 from an orphanage that Germany operates in the Gaza Strip to a new facility that Germany has established in Bethlehem in the West Bank. The move, after it was approved by Israel and carried out, was heavily criticized by the right-wing elements in Israel's government. Specifically, Israel's finance minister Bezalel Smotrich called it an immoral act and a value bankruptcy to approve such a request while Israeli hostages remain in Gaza. And Israel's minister of national security, Itamar Ben-Gvir, said that in war you eradicate your enemy and don't try to look pretty. Regarding the entrance of aid, there was no reports made in the last 24 hours regarding the entrance of aid trucks. In general, in the last several weeks since the breakdown of the entrance of humanitarian aid into the Gaza Strip, and specifically the northern parts of the Gaza Strip, there have been very few reports about how many aid trucks are entering. When reports do come out, they indicate that the average per day is between 60 and 90. I will say that tomorrow I'm going to publish a short video that explains why the situation has deteriorated very fast in the last several weeks in the northern parts of the Gaza Strip. However, right now, there's no report about how much aid entered in the last 24 hours. Moving on to the West Bank. In an IDF operation in the Zeta village near Tulkarem, a Palestinian, Mohammed Jaber, was killed. Jaber was reportedly carrying weapons and major explosive charges with him. The IDF stated that intelligence indicated that he was on his way to carry out a substantial suicide attack in a major city in Israel, likely Tel Aviv. He was reportedly killed after firing at the IDF forces who were trying to arrest him. Other IDF activity was reported in other areas of the West Bank, specifically in the areas of Nur Shams refugee camp and Tulkarem, where explosive devices and weaponry was located, as well as in the areas of Kalkilia, where weaponry and pipe bombs were found, and 150,000 new Israeli shekels funding terror activity was confiscated. A total of 20 Palestinians are reported arrested by the IDF throughout the West Bank in the last 24 hours. Other news, on the first day of Ramadan, some 16,000 Muslims are reported to have prayed in the Al-Aqsa Mosque in Jerusalem, with relatively few disruptions. Amidst this, the IDF published its official regulations regarding Palestinians entering Jerusalem during the month of Ramadan. Similar to previous years, entrance is going to be permitted to Palestinian men over the age of 55, Palestinian women over the age of 50, and children under the age of 10. All of them will have to have permits to enter as well. Last year, the restrictions were relatively similar. It was men over the age of 55, children under the age of 12, now it's been children under the age of 10, and last year all women were permitted to enter into Jerusalem to pray in Al-Aqsa Mosque, and now it's only women over the age of 50. So I will note that there's been a lot of reports regarding, is Israel going to impose different restrictions on Palestinians in Al-Aqsa Mosque or not, but a lot of these have been about controversy. Is Israel going to impose restrictions on Palestinian citizens of Israel who are going to come to pray in Al-Aqsa Mosque? There are no restrictions, according to government regulations at least, that are going to be imposed on Palestinian citizens of Israel. These regulations that I just mentioned relate to Palestinians who are not citizens in the West Bank. Moving on to the northern parts of Israel, southern parts of Lebanon, there was a barrage of 15 rockets fired from Hezbollah in Lebanon targeting the northern parts of Israel today. These targeted primarily the areas of the Western Galilee, including the areas of Ma'alot, Zuriel, Ma'alot Archisha. There were also rockets sent towards areas of Chosen, Al-Kosh, Fisuta, Granota Galil, Elon, and Goren. Hezbollah also stated that it fired 4 drones towards Israel. Later it was reported by the IDF that 2 Hezbollah drones crashed in Israeli airspace in the northern parts of Israel. Regarding IDF activity, IDF airstrikes were reported in the areas of Ita Sha'ab and Anakora, targeting Hezbollah infrastructure and military structures. There was also artillery and tank fire reported in the areas of Ita Sha'ab. Earlier in the day, Hezbollah military compound was targeted in the areas of El Jabin and Ataiba. Other news, after several different initial reports in Lebanon, the IDF confirmed that it carried out several airstrikes in the areas in the region of Baalbek. This is the northeastern parts of Lebanon. This is the second time that the IDF has attacked this region since the war began. Al-Arabi Jadid stated that 6 different airstrikes were noted. Later reports stated that it was possibly 4 airstrikes. And according to reports, a structure was attacked in the areas of Ansar, and other attacks took place in the areas of Dores, Tariya, and Shemaster. The IDF stated that it targeted compounds belonging to Hezbollah's air unit, and that this was in response to the drones that Hezbollah launched into Israel in the last several days. Some reports have stated thus far that 1 person was killed and 6 were injured. However, I'll add that those are initial reports. The numbers may vary as the hours go on. In addition to all this, Al-Manar reported that the IDF carried out substantial artillery fire in the areas of Yarun. Prior to the Baalbek attack, Hezbollah announced that 1 more operative of the group was killed, bringing the total number of operatives that Hezbollah states were killed in the war since the war began to 242. I remind everyone that the IDF says that the number of Hezbollah operatives that have been killed in the war is in fact much higher. Moving on to some of the regional developments, in Yemen, UK MTO reported a nautical incident south of the Hudaydah port in Yemen, and concurrently the naval security company Ombre also reported a missile incident in the region. Hours later, the Houthi spokesperson Yahya Saria stated that the Houthis attacked an American ship named Pinocchio in the Red Sea, adding, as I speculated that would be the case in the last several days, that the Houthis intend to increase their attacks during the month of Ramadan. After this, the U.S. Central Command confirmed that the Pinocchio ship was attacked, however stated that it was not an American ship, but it was in fact a Singapore ship sailing under Liberian banners. The U.S. military also added that the nautical missiles fired by the Houthis did not hit the ship, which continued on course. Other news, the coalition forces reportedly carried out a series of 6 airstrikes in Yemen, targeting an uncrewed naval vessel as well as 18 nautical missiles. Local sources in Yemen reported that the attacks took place in the Hudaydah region, specifically in the areas of At-Taif, Ras Issa, and El Jabana. And later on in the day, the exiled Yemeni government stated that 11 people were killed in 17 different strikes that the coalition carried out throughout the last 24 hours. Moving on to some of the political and general trends for the last 24 hours. Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu gave an interview to Fox News today, somewhat still addressing the diplomatic escalation between himself and U.S. President Biden. He stated that Israel and the United States agree on the aims of the war, but have disagreements about how best to achieve them. He added that the closer aligned Israel and the U.S. are, the more the benefits to the war efforts will be. In addition, Netanyahu stated that not operating in Rafah would be tantamount to the decision to not operate in Berlin during World War II, adding that the sooner the IDF invades Rafah, the sooner the intensive fighting stage of the war can be over. He concluded by stating that he is responsible for Israel's security, and that Biden's disagreements are not with Prime Minister Netanyahu, but rather with the entire Israeli population who are united in supporting Netanyahu's policies. Other political news. The UN Security Council held a special session to discuss the report on sexual violence and rape committed by the Hamas attackers during the October 7th attack. Israel's Foreign Minister Israel Katz attended the session alongside the family members of hostages and hostages who were released. Pramila Patten presented her report. This was a report that she created, expressing concern that hostages still in captivity are undergoing sexual abuses even as she is reading these lines. During the session, Israeli Foreign Minister Katz stated that the UN has been silent for too long on Hamas's crimes, called the events of October 7th the highest level of crimes against humanity. He demanded that the United Nations declare Hamas a terror group and impose sanctions on the movement, adding that their actions are worse than those of al-Qaeda and ISIS and other terror groups whom the UN imposed sanctions upon. Hours before the session, Katz also sent a letter to UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres, stating among others that if the victims of the October 7th attack had not been Jews or Israelis, Guterres would have responded differently, and that under his tenure the United Nations has become an organization that has reached an all-time low and has become a beacon for anti-Semitism and anti-Israel incitement. Other political news, 3 Palestinians were arrested in Italy today on suspicion of planning to carry out terror attacks and suicide attacks against, quote, civilian and military targets in a foreign country, i.e. likely Israel. The local police stated that they are part of the Tulkarem division that operates under the al-Aqsa Martyrs Brigade, which is an official terror group in the EU, and that Israel has officially requested that one of them at least be extradited. Other political news, Catherine Colonna, the person who was appointed by the United Nations to investigate allegations against UNRWA, is currently visiting Israel. She met with different government ministers in Israel, some of whom stated that UNRWA must be dismantled as it is part of the problem, not part of the solution. Israel is reportedly planning a diplomatic offensive against UNRWA during and after her visit, and has prepared a case to demonstrate how Hamas has used UNRWA facilities freely, how it has incited to violence and anti-Semitism within UNRWA schools, and evidence that UNRWA has not acted against such facets even when presented with evidence. According to what she was chartered by the UN, Colonna is supposed to develop a report and give preliminary results already during April, and it is noteworthy that several countries that have suspended their funding to UNRWA pending this investigation, such as Canada among others, have already stated that they're going to reinstate their funding to UNRWA given that the agency is close to going bankrupt and it is still the main agency that is giving out aid in the Gaza Strip. If you enjoyed these reports, please do remember to give them a like, subscribe, turn on notifications if you want to know when reports come out. If you have questions or comments, leave them in the comment section below. If you're interested in knowing what caused the latest acute catastrophe of humanitarian situation in the northern parts of the Gaza Strip, look for that short video I'm going to publish tomorrow. That is my report for the last 24 hours. I'll be back tomorrow.